The morning Cale Ashgrove arrived in Thorn Hollow, the whole village stopped to watch. He came with 6 riders, a black banner marked with a silver wolf, and a calm that made people nervous. Everyone knew who he was, the Alpha King, ruler of the Ashgrove Pack, the strongest shifter territory in the north. Kings like him did not visit small human villages, they summoned people to them. But Cale had not come to summon anyone, he had come for Lyra Voss. Lyra was the village healer, known for her steady hands and her quiet nature. She kept mostly to herself, tending the sick, growing herbs behind her small stone house, and avoiding anything that reminded her of the world she had left behind years ago. When she heard hooves outside her door that morning, she assumed it was another villager needing medicine. She did not expect to open the door and find the Alpha King standing there, tall and unreadable, with the weight of his pack behind him. "Lyra Voss," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I have come to ask for your hand in marriage. A union between your village and my pack would secure peace for both our people." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Villagers gathered at a distance, whispering. Lyra felt her heart pound, not with excitement, but with something closer to fear. "No," she said. The single word silenced the crowd. No one refused an Alpha King. Certainly not in public, and certainly not without hesitation. Cale's eyes narrowed slightly, more surprised than angered. "You understand what I am offering?" "I understand," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "And I am refusing it." She did not explain herself. She simply stepped back into her house and closed the door, leaving the Alpha King standing in the dust of her doorway, humiliated in front of his own men. That should have been the end of it. Kings moved on. Proposals were forgotten. Pride healed. But Cale's wolf did not forget. For 3 days, he stayed in the neighboring territory, brooding, refusing to return home. His advisors urged him to let it go, to find another match, to protect his reputation. But something in him would not settle. It was not simply pride wounded by rejection. It was something deeper, something his wolf recognized before his mind did. On the 4th day, he found an excuse to cross back into human lands. A trade dispute, he told his council. Minor, but requiring his personal attention. It was not true, and everyone knew it. He arrived in Thorn Hollow just as the sun was setting, his men trailing behind him with visible discomfort. Lyra saw him from her window, standing near the village well, speaking with the local merchant about grain prices he clearly did not care about. She felt her pulse quicken, though she told herself it was only irritation. She did not go out to greet him. He did not come to her door, but he stayed until nightfall, watching the village, watching her house, before finally riding back toward his own lands. It happened again the following week, and the week after that. Each time, Cale found a reason, a border concern, a courtesy visit to maintain peace, a message that could easily have been sent by messenger instead of delivered by the king himself. Villagers began to whisper. Shifters were not trusted in human lands, not since the old wars, and Cale's frequent visits stirred old fears even as they stirred new curiosity. Lyra tried to ignore him. She busied herself with her work, tending to a sick child with a fever, preparing herbs for the coming winter, avoiding the village square whenever she heard his men had arrived. But avoiding him did not stop her from noticing things. The way he always seemed to know if she had been unwell, the way supplies she needed sometimes appeared at her door, left without explanation, but she recognized the quality of Ashgrove craftsmanship. The way his eyes found her across the square, even when he pretended to be occupied with something else. One evening, unable to bear the tension any longer, she confronted him near the edge of the forest, where the village met his pack's territory. "Why do you keep coming here?" she demanded. "I gave you my answer." Cale studied her for a long moment before answering. "You did, but my wolf has not accepted it. That is not my problem." "No," he agreed quietly. "It is mine. I only wish I understood why." Something in his honesty caught her off guard. She had expected arrogance, the entitlement of a king, unused to hearing no. Instead, she saw something almost vulnerable in his expression, a confusion that mirrored her own feelings more than she wanted to admit. "You do not know me," she said, softer now. "You do not know why I said no. Then tell me." She almost did. The words rose in her throat, memories she had buried for years threatening to surface. But she swallowed them back and turned away instead, retreating into the safety of her home, leaving him once again standing at the border between their two worlds. What Chaol did not know, what no one in his pack knew, was the reason behind Lyra's refusal. Years earlier, before she came to Thornhollow, Lyra had lived among shifters herself. Her family had belonged to a smaller pack, caught in the middle of a territorial war between larger, more powerful packs seeking to expand their land. She had been young then, barely more than a child, when the fighting reached her village. She remembered the fire, the screaming, the chaos of wolves and humans running for their lives. She remembered losing her parents in a single terrible night and being taken in by distant relatives who eventually settled in the human lands, far from anything that might remind her of the world that had taken everything from her. She had built a quiet life since then, a safe life, a life without packs, without kings, without the kind of power struggles that had once destroyed her family. Chaol's proposal had not simply been an offer of marriage. It had been an invitation back into a world she had sworn never to return to. She could not explain this to him, not yet, perhaps not ever. Weeks passed. Chaol's visits continued, though less frequent, more careful, as if he sensed he needed to give her space, even as his wolf resisted the idea. His council grew increasingly concerned. An alpha king spending so much time in human territory, pursuing a woman who had publicly rejected him, was seen by some as weakness. Rumors spread among rival packs that Chaol Ashgrove was distracted, unfocused, vulnerable. One such rumor reached the ears of a rival pack leader named Draven Marrow, whose territory bordered Chaol's to the east. And Draven had long resented Ashgrove's dominance in the north, and he saw in Chaol's apparent distraction an opportunity too valuable to ignore. Draven's plan was simple and cruel. If Chaol cared enough about the human healer to risk his reputation and cross into forbidden lands repeatedly, then she could be used as leverage, a way to destabilize Chaol's rule or draw him into a conflict on unfavorable terms. Draven's men entered Thornhollow under the cover of night, disguised as traveling merchants. They watched the village for 2 days before making their move, waiting until Lyra was alone at the edge of the forest, gathering herbs in the dim evening light. She sensed danger before she saw it, an old instinct from her childhood that never fully faded. But by the time she turned, it was too late. 2 men emerged from the trees, their movements too quick and too coordinated to be ordinary travelers. Lyra ran, but the forest was unfamiliar in the darkness, and her pursuers knew exactly where they were going. She was caught within minutes, dragged toward the tree line that marked the border of Ashgrove territory, clearly intended as bait to draw Chaol into a trap. What Draven had not accounted for was how quickly Chaol would sense that something was wrong. Miles away, in his own territory, Chaol's wolf stirred with a sudden, violent unease. He had felt nothing like it before, a pull so strong it nearly brought him to his knees in the middle of his own council chamber. His advisors urged caution, reminded him of the political risk of entering human lands uninvited during such a tense time, but Chaol was already moving before they finished speaking. He crossed the border faster than any of his men could follow, driven by an instinct he did not fully understand but refused to ignore. He found Lyra's trail near the forest edge, the scent of fear and unfamiliar shifters heavy in the air, and followed it without hesitation. He found them just as Draven's men were preparing to move Lyra across the border into contested territory. Chaol did not wait for explanations or negotiations. He moved with the speed and ferocity of a king, protecting something far more important to him than pride or politics. The confrontation was brief but intense. Chaol's presence alone was enough to make Draven's men hesitate, unprepared for the Alpha King's sudden arrival, without his full guard. In the chaos that followed, Lyra managed to break free, scrambling toward the safety of the trees while Chaol dealt with her captors. When it was over, Draven's men retreated, unwilling to risk further conflict with an Alpha King, clearly willing to fight without hesitation for what he considered his. Chaol turned to find Lyra sitting against a tree, shaken but unharmed, staring at him with an expression he had never seen from her before. Not anger, not fear, something closer to understanding. "You could have been killed," she said quietly. Crossing the border like that, without your men, without permission from your own council. I did not think about any of that, Chaol admitted, kneeling beside her. I only thought about getting to you. For the first time since his initial proposal, Lyra did not turn away from him. Instead, she studied his face, searching for the arrogance she had expected from a king, the entitlement she had feared would define him. She found none of it, only genuine concern, and something that looked remarkably like fear, the same fear she had carried alone for years. I need to tell you something, she said softly. And for the first time, she did. She told him about her family, about the war that had taken them, about the years of running from anything that reminded her of that pain. She told him that her refusal had never truly been about him, but about a world she associated with loss and devastation. Chaol listened without interrupting, without judgment, allowing her grief the space it had never been given. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment before speaking. I did not know, he said. I am sorry for the pain that shaped your fear, and I am sorry that my proposal, however well-intended, must have felt like a demand rather than a choice. It did, Lyra admitted. Then let me offer you something different, Chaol said. Not a political arrangement. Not an obligation to secure peace between our people, simply a choice. To stay as you are, to walk away from all of this entirely, or to see where this might lead, on your own terms, at your own pace. Lyra studied him for a long moment, weighing years of guarded distance against the quiet sincerity in his eyes. For the first time since that terrible night in her childhood, she felt something other than fear when she thought about the world she had left behind. I am not ready to become a queen, she said finally. I do not know if I ever will be. That is not what I am asking, Chaol said. I am only asking if you would allow me to know you. Nothing more, unless you wish it. It was not the grand proposal he had first offered, with its promises of peace between packs and human villages. It was smaller, quieter, and far more honest, and perhaps because of that, it was the first offer Lyra did not immediately want to refuse. In the weeks that followed, Chaol's visits to Thornhollow continued, but they changed in nature. He no longer came with excuses about trade disputes or border security. He came simply to see her, to sit with her while she worked, to listen as she slowly, carefully, began sharing pieces of her past she had kept hidden for years. The village grew accustomed to his presence, and slowly, so did she. There was no grand wedding, no formal announcement of a political alliance. Instead, there was a healer and a king, learning to trust each other one conversation at a time, building something neither political necessity nor his wolf's insistence could have created alone. Months later, when Lyra finally walked toward the border of Ashgrove territory on her own, it was not because a king had commanded it, or because a treaty required it. It was because she had chosen it herself, freely, as an equal, rather than a prize to be won. Chaol met her at the border, his expression carrying none of the confidence of that first day at her doorstep, only quiet hope. You came, he said. I did, Lyra replied. Not as a queen, not yet, just as myself. That, Chaol said, reaching for her hand, is exactly who I hoped would come. And together, they crossed the border between their two worlds, not as king and subject, but as two people who had finally learned to choose each other honestly.